Oh hey, didn't see you there. Welcome to episode 5 of my Baja Samurai content series. Last episode, you saw that the LFX engine was hitting my front differential, and I teased that wasn't going to be a problem for me. If you're wondering why that's the case, it's because we're getting rid of it. But wait, how can you have four-wheel drive without a front differential? The answer to that question is pretty easy. Line?
You can't.
Oh, that's right, you can't. But before you worry too much, just know that rear-wheel drive vehicles have pretty much been the standard in desert racing since its inception. Now, there has been an influx of all-wheel drive vehicles, particularly in the trophy truck class over recent years, but the fact of the matter is, rear-wheel drive is still very prevalent in desert racing. But there's something else I haven't told you guys yet, and it's pretty important. And that's that I'm getting rid of the front solid axle. I know. And we'll get into all the details of that later. But for now, I have to get the front axle off the Samurai. And in order to do that, I have to lift the front end up. And if you know anything about me by now, it's that I don't like to do things the same way everyone else does. So I've come up with some pretty outside the box thinking to create some front jack stands for the Samurai. Let's go check them out. Okay, so here they are in all their glory.
Wait, why are you wearing different clothes?
Because I filmed this segment 3 weeks ago. Now, if you're asking yourself, are those boat trailer jacks? The answer to that question is yes. Big disclaimer, do not try this at home. Seriously, for your own safety. I figured, hey, what do boat people and car people have in common? Well, if you answer that question, spending all your money on a project without your wife's approval, you'd be right. But also, we have to move heavy things around. And that's why I thought of these trailer jacks and why they'd be perfect for this project. Each of these trailer jacks is rated for 1,000 pounds each. And considering my brother-in-law and I can lift the front end of this Samurai up using brute strength only,
check out these muscles.
I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to handle everything we need with these. That being said, you're not going to catch me ever going under the Samurai without also having jack stands under the frame as well. These are really just in place to help me move the Samurai around once I take the front axle out. Typically, when you're using normal jack stands, once you set it in place and take the axle out, you're going to be stuck where you are. And at the rate I'm going, it could be another 10 months.
You mean 10 years?
Exactly, before I get something else in here that would allow me to move it around. So these are going to be great. And quite frankly, I think they solve a lot of problems for me. 1, they can support the vehicle. 2, they can move the vehicle. And 3, they can lift the vehicle. With an added bonus that actually they were pretty cheap. I think they were like 25 bucks a piece. So now that they're in place, I think the only thing left to do, lift up the Samurai and let's work on getting that front axle out. So that's when I said, hey babe, don't worry. Those boxes are just parts for my daily driving. Okay, so now the front axle is up off the ground. I've got 2 jack stands here for extra safety. They're right underneath the front section of the frame, just in case there was ever an issue with these new jack stands that I've put in. I've also put wheel chocks behind the rear tires because I don't want this vehicle moving at all. There's no brake system, it's just a rolling body. So anything you can do to help the body from moving around, you're going to want to do it. Now, I've never taken the front axle of a vehicle completely out before. I've done things with leaf springs, coil springs, shocks, all that stuff when I was working on suspensions back with my Jeep Cherokee, but never taken one completely out before, so it's going to be a little bit of a learning process for me. The good news is, this is a rolling body. It doesn't have any steering from what I can see right now hooked up, so I think it's just going to be disconnecting the leaf springs, maybe taking the tires off, dropping it as low as I can, and then pulling it out from under there, and we should be good to go. Alright, so we finally got the front solid axle out. Came out without much issue. I did have to cut the U-bolts with an angle grinder, but that's to be expected on something this old. Once I did that, came right out, and look at all this newfound room we have under here. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to take the LFX engine again, we're going to lower it into place, and now I should be able to get it low enough where we can finally close the hood. Once it's there, I'm thinking I'm going to take the crate that came with the crate engine, the wood crate, slide it back under here, shim it up if needed, get it to the right height, rest the engine on it, and then with the hood closed, now I can assess how far we need to cut into the transmission tunnel and what's going on with the engine mount situation. So let's get the LFX, let's lower it in place, and let's see how it looks. Kind of like this. I don't know, it always works on TV. Must be a YouTube thing. Let's do it the hard way. Okay, so after all that hard work, I think you can see that the engine is in there, and yes, the hood does shut. As I open it up here, you're gonna see that there's plenty of room up top now to put the intake, and man, that thing looks sweet in there, doesn't it? Well, now we can focus on the transmission tunnel and worrying about the engine mounts and all the accessories and seeing what other headaches we're gonna be dealing with in there. But for now, I'm gonna take a break, because that's what I call a Cold War accomplishment. What, expecting something different? Well, time to go back to the future. Hey, it worked that time. Now clearly some big decisions have been made about the front axle. So let's talk about that in a little more detail. Now if you've ever seen a trophy truck or a pre-runner going through a section of whoops at speed, you'll see that suspension cycles like a well-orchestrated symphony. With over 2 feet of suspension travel, I might feel more comfortable putting a wine glass on top of one of those than I would a Tempur-Pedic mattress. That's the dumbest joke ever. Now I don't think my Samurai is going to allow me to get 2 feet of suspension travel in the front, but I am trying to get a similar effect. And I know a lot of Samurai owners and rock crawlers out there are going, Carter, what are you doing? And quite frankly, if I was building a trail rig, I would keep the solid front axle. But I'm not. And in desert racing, independent front suspensions are the way to go for a few reasons. 1, they help reduce limitations in suspension up travel. And as you saw in the last episode, I have very little room for up travel to begin with, so that's definitely going to help. 2, it's going to give me a much lighter unsprung weight. And for those of you who don't quite know what that means, think about it this way. Let's say you're ripping along at 60 miles an hour and you hit a bump. That bump's going to send your front axle pushing back towards the body with a lot of inertia. And your suspension's going to have to push it back down towards the road so you can gain traction again. Now, if you have a very heavy front axle and it gets bumped back, your suspension has to work that much harder to push it back towards the ground. But if you have a nice light one, it's going to be able to push it back much faster, reducing your time to traction. 3, independent tire geometry control. When you have a solid front axle, if something happens on one side, it's going to have an effect on the other. But as the name implies, with an independent setup, you can have complete independent control of what's going on with each tire on each side, including some control, if you're going with an A-arm system, on the angle of the tire all the way through the suspension travel, which is great in this sport. So now that we have that out of the way, literally, it's time for us to start focusing on the engine mounts and the transmission and everything else that's going to cause a million headaches for us. And well, no cliffhangers for next episode, but do me a favor. If you liked what you saw, hit the subscribe button right now so it'll notify you when the next episode comes out. Stay dusty.